Here.
Representative Townsend. Vice Chair Cadena.
Here.
Madam Chair,
I'm present.
we have a quorum.
Very good. We will just begin with the first item on our agenda, which is the Harm Reduction Act, House Bill 52. Let's see if we can make sure all of the sponsors are on the the correct status. Representative Lujan, Representative Hockman V. Hill, Representative Chandler's with us, and there are 2 senators as well, but I'm not sure if they're planning to attend. Looks like we've been joined by Representative Cook as well. Come on.
I'll never get this mute thing correct. Madam Chair, Representative Lujan's asking to be let in as a panelist.
And I'm trying to see if I'm supposed to be able to do that, and having a little problem. So let me try again. These have Representative Hockman V. Hill needs to be promoted. Dr. Scrays needs to be promoted. I'm not sure about other experts. The sponsors will have to tell us. Representative Hockman V. Hill, who else needs to be with you besides Dr. Scrays?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Our primary sponsor, Representative Lujan, and I don't know if Ms. Arian Showers from DOH also wants to be an expert if she's here as well.
All right. I'm looking for Representative Lujan.
I'll text her as well, Madam Chair.
She's on now.
Is she on the panel now? Or
Yes,
on...
I just saw her.
Okay, good. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Madam Chair, so I have who's here? Secretary Scrace, Arian Showers, Josh Switek, and Shelley Strong.
Can you tell me those names again? I got Showers in there.
Josh Switek.
I got him already.
Shelley Strong.
I've gotten them both.
Thank you. And we also, I have other folks here that are in support, other secretaries, but I think we need these as our expert witnesses, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. We're ready for you to begin.
Thank you. Let's see. Well, great. I'm going to start now. Thank you, Madam Chair, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Thankfully, we're here safely during this pandemic, and I'd like to start by saying a few words about the New Mexico Department of Health and Harm Reduction Program. First of all, New Mexico can be proud that our state has one of the best harm reduction programs in the United States. Through its almost 24 years of continuous operations, New Mexico Harm Reduction Program staff members have trained several other state and county health department staff on harm reduction programming and operation. The overall harm reduction program has grown from just a few hundred people in the first years to over 15,000 annually served today. And it operates as the largest network of syringe service programs in the United States, which ultimately translates to lives saved, where people didn't die of HIV, hepatitis, or other blood infections, and were given another chance for recovery. Now I'd like to move the discussion to the law as proposed legislation. The Harm Reduction Act was established into law in 1997 as only the second state with a legal statewide syringe access program, and has been in continuous operation since 1998. In 2001, New Mexico became the first state to enact legislation allowing the legal distribution of naloxone through harm reduction locations. As the DOH has set the standard for public health and safety measures under the harm reduction model, we look again for bipartisan support to address what we know today as a public health crisis, just as we did with previous data-driven policy revisions that added syringe exchange programs and naloxone usage. We have a proven record when it comes to stepping up and working together to solve public health crises in our state, and now we are here today to do it again. As one of the priorities of the New Mexico DOH, this is perhaps one of the most critical urgent pieces of legislation we'll hear this session as a measure that will save lives. HB 52 will support the harm reduction program and the Department of Health in its efforts to address the alarming and rising opioid overdose rates in New Mexico. In New Mexico, opioid overdoses began to increase dramatically beginning in late 2018. And because of the current statutory framework, the NMDOH was prevented from intervening with best practices. The DOH program estimates that a third of fentanyl opioid related overdoses, about 250 deaths in New Mexico, could have been prevented if we had updated the current law. This bill does two things which are critical to the department's ability to intervene effectively. One, it updates the Harm Reduction Act to allow the department authority to decide on the supplies necessary for reducing the spread of communicable diseases. And two, it exempts from the definition of paraphernalia drug testing devices that DOH would then supply. These two provisions of the bill will allow the department to engage people who use substances with sterile supplies. This is not only important for reducing the spread of disease, it also means program participants are tested, given treatment, provided with recovery options, and can be given naloxone overdose prevention education and drug testing devices so that they can test for dangerous tainted drugs and avoid overdose. Reducing the negative health effects of drug use in our communities plays a critical role in an overall public safety strategy. Harm reduction is a cornerstone of this strategy. And through this legislation, we are paving the way for expansion of access and other critical services to help people with substance use disorders stay healthy, stay alive. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to now ask if Secretary Grace or Arian Showers, who's a DOH Policy Director, or Josh Switek, who is the DOH Hepatitis and Harm Reduction Program Manager, if they'd like to have any words at this time. Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, with your permission, I think I'm going to speak not only on behalf of our crew at DOH that were just named, but also on behalf of the Secretaries of Department of Public Services and our Corrections Department, Secretaries Jason Bowie and Alicia Tafoya Lucero. As the Acting Secretary of Health, I feel like this bill is absolutely essential to deal with what's really a very grave public health emergency. I know everything has been swallowed up in COVID, but that doesn't mean that everything else has gone away. And I think there are many people on this call who know of people with severe substance use problems and even know in your own families or friends who have children who've died of an overdose. We appreciate the legislature's innovation in 1997 in the needle exchange program. This is an extension of that will kind of take the handcuffs off the Secretary of Health and the Department of Health to intervene much more quickly by decriminalizing the tools we need to prevent unnecessary deaths. You know, from the law enforcement perspective, Secretary Bowie echoed to me on the phone how important it was to try to get further upstream from Narcan administration. It's a life-saving drug, but we'd like to intervene before we get to that point. Alicia Tafoya Lucero from Corrections, same exact observation. They send their inmates when they're discharged with Narcan and lots of supplies, but she underscored the importance of this kind of intervention early to prevent unnecessary deaths. I wanted to be purposely brief out of respect for this committee and all that you have to deal with. We're here to answer any questions you have. Just as a physician, one last thing, when I switch a patient who is on opioids, and we have people who legitimately need them, from something like morphine over to fentanyl, we have to be extraordinarily careful. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than other drugs. And so the smallest possible amount, and in your handout, you can see that little grain next to the penny that we sent you, is lethal. And so this is an opportunity to move further upstream, bring more people in to our treatment programs before they suffer a fatal overdose. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to turn it back to you. And I believe the panel here stands for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If my co-sponsor, Representative Day, Hodgman V. Hill, has anything to add, I'd just like to hear or have her say something.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Lujan. I think that was a fantastic introduction as to why this bill is critically needed at this time. And I really have nothing further to add. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, as been our practice during the virtual meetings, we do a poll so that those who are in attendance can express their support or opposition to a bill. Ordinarily, if we were in person, I would ask those who are in attendance to raise their hands in the committee room, and that's what this amounts to. So we will have a poll go up for those who want to express their support for House Bill 52. And if there is any opposition, individuals can do that as well. Excuse me. So we'll put that up for about 20 seconds. Is that ready to go? Here we go. Okay, the results of the poll are 96% of those responding are in favor and 4% are in opposition. So with that, I'm going to go to public comment, and I'll go to the attendees. And if you would like to say something, please give yourself 1 minute to do so, and raise your hand though, so that I can see that you would like to be called upon. Get to the. Okay, now, at least the hands are at the front now. David Hoddama.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. David Hoddama. I'm a registered lobbyist for the Drug Policy Alliance, and I'm pleased but also sad to be able to speak in favor of this important legislation. I'm glad that Secretary and Dr. Scrace is on the call. To borrow the vernacular of the times, drug addiction, drug abuse, drug overdose of this sort is a worldwide pandemic. Sadly, fentanyl is perhaps one of the most deadly variants our society has faced, and we have had the tools in the past, sadly no vaccine, but preventative measures to stave off drug overdose. This bill is the next step in our fight against this pandemic of overdose death. It's a common sense approach to an evolving danger in our community. There's almost no one in New Mexico who has not been touched by a fentanyl-related death. So I'd urge this committee to pass this legislation, listen to the science, listen to the advisors, listen to both the physicians like Dr. Scrace and the public safety folks like Mr. Bowie, and move this legislation forward so that we can get this done this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a hand up in room 309. That's the House Judiciary room. So that may be why we have that number. Is there someone there who would like to speak? I think I'm going to go to the next person in line, Mary Carmack Altweiss.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am the district attorney in the 1st Judicial District that encompasses Santa Fe, Rio Arriba, and Los Alamos counties, and I am strongly in favor of this bill. Not only will this potentially save lives, but I speak to the criminal justice perspective. People that are addicts have a substance abuse disorder, and we at least in the 1st Judicial District are not interested in going after people that are trying to be safe and make sure that they're not taking drugs that they're not meaning to. And so we wildly support this, and I would urge the committee to please vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Destiny Cisneros.
Madam Chair and members of the community. Madam Chair and members of the community, thank you for having me. I'm here today to talk about giving youth and others a choice. Although I'm in recovery and am currently living at Serenity Mesa, I myself became addicted to fentanyl from outside sources, and I wish I would have known how much fentanyl I was being given. The drug test fentanyl strips give people that choice. About 6 months ago, I was homeless and on the streets when I was using fentanyl, and I overdosed. I overdosed because it's extremely hard to tell the difference between an actual pharmacist-made fentanyl pill and an underground street pill maker's supposed fentanyl pill that's been stamped to look identical. When this is an obstacle, you never know how much fentanyl you're getting from each pill, and this is how I overdosed. If I had the fentanyl drug test strips when I was still doing fentanyl, I would have had the choice. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Next, Douglas Carver.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Douglas Carver. I am Deputy Director of the New Mexico Sentencing Commission, and I will be brief. Our legislative committee, the Sentencing Commission's legislative committee, met and discussed this bill at its last meeting, and the legislative committee voted to support it unanimously. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Jason Lydiard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Jason Lydiard.
Mr. Lydiard, we're not hearing you now. Did something happen? let me move along and then I'll come back to Mr. Ledyard. Just Jerica Salazar. Can everybody else hear and I'm the only one not hearing?
No, I wasn't taken off mute. I just got the
Oh,
sign.
okay. All right. There we go. Go ahead, Jerica.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jerica Salazar, and I grew up in Coyote, New Mexico. In our communities, sorry, okay, there we go. Oh my goodness. Okay, my phone is acting up. In our communities, we have a large number of people struggling with substance dependence, and these services have come to save thousands of lives. These services have helped ensure that they stay as safe as possible and they avoid the spread of intravenous diseases. And most importantly, these services have promoted recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rachel Biggs.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Rachel Biggs with Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless. We have been a harm reduction outreach provider since the Harm Reduction Act was passed almost 25 years ago. Our harm reduction program in New Mexico is something we should all be promoting and proud of. The life-saving services are essential and have real direct impact on saving lives and reducing harm to our communities. A lot has changed since the Harm Reduction Act was first passed, and it's imperative that the Act be updated to include supplies or devices used for the testing of controlled substances. The program estimates that 250 deaths could have been prevented had testing supplies or devices been provided in recent years. According to the CDC, people that utilize syringe services programs are 5 times more likely to seek treatment and more likely to reduce or end their drug use. Syringe services programs also reduce overdose deaths. We have seen incredible success with naloxone to save lives, and we look forward to the possibility of saving even more lives with the provision of drug testing devices. We urge your support of HB 52 and thank the sponsors for this legislation.
Thank you. Next, JD Bullington. Mr. Bullington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It took a while to unmute me. Thank you so much. Members of the committee, this is J.D. Bullington speaking on behalf of the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce today. There's a lot that this bill does, but we want to speak to one important aspect of it. Fentanyl has become the leading killer of adults ages 18 to 45. And when I saw that statistic, I couldn't believe it. I had to look it up myself. And sure enough, fentanyl is now the leading killer of half of our adult population. Amid our concerns about gun violence and crime, we must realize that the most prolific killer in our society right now is fentanyl. Part of stopping the wave of overdose deaths involves allowing drug users to determine whether their drugs are laced with fentanyl. We appreciate this legislation because it's going to ensure that it's not a crime to possess or use testing strips to make that determination. This isn't the only answer to drug abuse and overdose prevention in New Mexico, but it's a very sensible step that we fully support at the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce because there's no question this is going to save lives.
Thank you. Kim Chavez Cook. Ms. Cook, is your hand up?
There we go, Madam Chair. Sorry, it takes a minute for that option to come up to unmute. This is Kim Chavez Cook with the Law Offices of the Public Defender. We do stand in strong support of this legislation and thank the sponsor for bringing it forward. I don't have much to add that hasn't already been said by others, so I'll leave it at that for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Wilger.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Susan Wilger, I'm here on behalf of the Center for Health Innovation. We're New Mexico's Public Health Institute, and we are in full support of this bill. I want to thank the sponsors and our colleagues at Department of Health for their leadership in making this bill possible. One thing with the Center for Health Innovation is we work with communities throughout the state. Many of them are substance abuse prevention coalitions, but other community coalitions. And we're hearing from not only service providers, but family members and people experience substance use disorder. They're in full support of this bill. And we especially appreciate the fact that it will allow individuals to stay alive, to seek treatment, to prevent the spread of disease. And we also really appreciate the decriminalization of supplies, as well as expanding this program to practices throughout New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bennett Bauer.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Bennett Bauer. I'm the Chief Public Defender for the state of New Mexico. It's really nice to be testifying on behalf of the bill alongside my district attorney here in Santa Fe and Judge Jason Lydiard from the 1st Judicial District. I think this bill is an important part of an approach to substance use and abuse, which is good both for public health and for public safety. It allows us to try and frankly keep people alive who have substance abuse disorders while we try to offer services to them and address the problems that come and challenges with that substance use. So speaking strongly in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Nix.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Nix. I'm the Executive Director of Allianz of New Mexico. We serve individuals who are living with HIV and those who inject substances and use other drugs across all of southern New Mexico. We have offices in Roswell and Las Cruces. I'm originally from Indiana, but worked here in New Mexico since 2018. And this bill has the possibility of allowing us to have more opportunities to save lives. We have around 4,000 syringe exchanges interactions each year, and each one of those interactions allows us to prevent further transmissions of HIV and hepatitis. And each one of those thousands of interactions allow us to have opportunities to provide harm reduction activities and work with individuals to get them into substance use treatment. Like I said, I'm from Indiana, where we had an HIV outbreak that made national news. We had HIV rates in one county higher than sub-Saharan Africa, and the driver of that outbreak was fentanyl. Unfortunately, fentanyl is here in New Mexico now, and I know these tools can help us prevent New Mexico from experiencing what we had to go through in Indiana. I ask you to please support this bill, as this will allow us to have more opportunities to work with clients, as I mentioned above. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Karen Whitlock.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Karen Whitlock with the National Association of Social Workers New Mexico chapter. And we stand in strong support of this legislation like everyone else. It's rare that we can legislate something that will actually allow people to save their own lives. This is so exciting, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak on this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a hand up that says Serenity Mesa.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, and committee members, my name is Nadia Mata. I'm 16 years old and I'm currently in recovery at Serenity Mesa. Passing this bill will save many people's lives, especially the ones in my community, considering the amount of people in New Mexico that have been affected by fentanyl. Unfortunately, I was one of those people affected by this notorious drug. When talking about this particular drug, it really hits home because me, as well as my family members and friends, have come face to face with its disadvantages. I've experienced many shortcomings because of this drug, such as multiple overdoses and short-term paralysis. I wish I would have had the fentanyl strips in hand prior to consumption of fentanyl so that I could have had the choice to pass up the amount I was given. After almost 90 days of sobriety, I'm proud to say that I'm an advocate for fentanyl users and will do anything to save a young person's life by vouching for this bill. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Alex Williams.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Alex and I am a healthcare policy advocate at the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. We at the center stand in support of HB 52. Everyone should have access to care and the help that they need, and when they do, our communities are safer. Federal law now allows states to use federal money to purchase fentanyl test strips that save lives. Similarly, the harm reduction program should be allowed to adapt to changing patterns of substance abuse and addiction and add items like testing strips to the supplies it already provides to reduce drug overdoses. Doing so will make the program better at reducing harm and improving the health of our community and meeting the overall purpose of the program. Thank you, and we urge a due pass for HB 52.
Thank you. Ashley Charzuk.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ashley Charzuk, and I am a harm reduction specialist residing in Bernalillo County, working for several different organizations providing harm reduction to the community. And I wanted to come today to make sure to let everyone know that I'm in support of the legislation. We did see the previous legislation lower the risk of bloodborne pathogen illness, HIV, and hepatitis C. And in addition to that, we saw the naloxone legislation lower overdose rates. If we are allowed to see this legislation pass, we will actually see people have autonomy over what they are putting into their bodies, namely fentanyl. Fentanyl has caused our overdose rate to skyrocket in such a short time, and this legislation would allow for that autonomy for these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Feudy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Philip Feudy. I'm the Harm Reduction Program Director for the Mountain Center. We provide harm reduction and other services in Santa Fe, Rio Arriba, and Taos counties. And we are in strong support of this as well. Fentanyl has entered the community in a way that heroin and other substances hasn't. There's a large number of people who use it, who don't inject, and we're seeing this, as evidenced by the increasing numbers of high school aged youth experiencing ODs, overdoses in the past year. We provide services to about 2,000 unique individuals, maybe more, up in the north. And we have clients in very large numbers who are switching to smoking versus injection, or switching to other non-injection drugs or, methods of administration. And, we would very much like to be able to keep pace with that change and keep the folks that we have these relationships with engaged. And we risk losing them by not being able to provide services that for their immediate needs. Drug checking programs, including fentanyl test strips, have been successfully implemented nationally, and also enjoy the federal support of both the Centers for Disease Control and SAMHSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Felicia Trujillo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felicia Trujillo. I am the Executive Director at Dedicated Outreach and Prevention Education Services and the Overdose Prevention Coordinator at the Health Equity Council. And we strongly support this bill, not only because it promotes the empowerment of our community members and the harm reduction model as using a more non-judgmental approach to helping people that are using substances, but it also allows people to make more healthy or more individualized health choices when it comes to substances. And I think that's most important for those of us that are out there working with community members that are using substances. You'll notice that a lot of the overdose that happens in the community is not something that you're going to hear about in traditional statistics. There is a lot less overdose deaths because we are out there providing these services to community members. And I think it's important that we understand and recognizing that approach as being the most successful one when it comes to community members using substances. we strongly promote this bill and hope that this bill will pass with flying colors, so that we can help our communities stay strong, stay healthy, and stay safe, because we all have different ideals about the harm reduction model, but I think we all agree that we all want to keep community members safe so that we can have conversations in the future about what choices work for them. Thank you.
And I was trying to find the full name of someone who was in the queue, and I clicked on it and he disappeared. His name was Daniel Blaney, and I don't know, but it's a hyphenated name. And now Daniel's disappeared, but it's his turn. So Daniel, if you're there.
Madam Chair, I'm here.
Good.
My name is Daniel. Thank you. My name is Daniel Blaney Cohen. I'm a senior legislative attorney with the American Medical Association, and the AMA is very pleased to support House Bill 52. We support House Bill 52 because of the partnerships that it will help develop in New Mexico to further support harm reduction measures. Increasing access to fentanyl test strips and other drug checking supplies is an important part of an all-of-the-above approach to harm reduction measures. Previous speakers have emphasized the role of the federal government to authorize states to use federal funds for the purchase of fentanyl test strips, and House Bill 52 will help further those important goals. Finally, the AMA supports House Bill 52 because your Department of Health and other organizations have gone ahead and provided the rest of the nation an important example of how to pursue harm reduction policy and put it into action. Madam Speaker, the AMA, for these reasons, strongly supports House Bill 52.
Thank you. Diane McCash.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. I just wanted to briefly say that as a mother of a son who's had a severe and pervasive addiction problem, this could save his life. Currently, he's not using. He's not in a position to use. He is incarcerated and he'll be getting out again. And I'm afraid he'll start using again. And so the life you saved could be his. And I really appreciate this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexandria Taylor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Alexandria Taylor, and today I'm testifying personally, even though we know this is also a survivor issue. 3 years ago, my son and I lost his father to a fentanyl overdose, and I wish for no other family to ever experience the pain we have experienced. Addiction is a disease, and harm reduction is an evidence-based practice seeking to bring dignity to the lives of those who use substances and to reduce overdose deaths. I ask you to support HB 52, and I hope that next year we are here talking about going one step further with opening overdose prevention sites in our state. And if I may, I just wanted to say to the young person who just testified from Serenity Mesa, we are here, we see you, and we are rooting for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I have Carrie Robin Brunder.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Carrie Robin Brunder, registered lobbyist with the New Mexico Medical Society. The Medical Society supports House Bill 52. We actually serve on the American Medical Association Substance Use and Pain Care Task Force, and New Mexico is often looked to as a national model in its harm reduction strategies. This bill aligns with the AMA national recommendations. We also serve on the New Mexico Department of Health Overdose Task Force, and we know that as physicians, we want to do everything we can to ensure our patients do not overdose unnecessarily. By decriminalizing fentanyl strips, we can avoid complications that arise when someone takes it unknowingly. And we believe that granting the Department of Health the flexibility that's in this bill to ensure supplies are as up to date as possible will help save future lives. Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We urge you to vote yes.
Gwendolyn Gallagher.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Gwendolyn Gallagher, Aging and Long-Term Services Department. ALTSD is an active participant in the Behavioral Health Collaborative, and substance use disorder and harm reduction are two issues that are important to the collaborative. Aging and Long-Term Services Department strongly advocates support for House Bill 52, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Judge Lydiard.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jason Lydiard, and I'm a district court judge in the First Judicial District of New Mexico. I have had the ability to review House Bill 52, and I firmly support this necessary legislation. This proposed legislation provides a pragmatic approach to the realities of substance use in our communities and the harms that it imposes upon citizens who use substances and the communities in which they reside. This legislation is certain to save lives for one key provision, that it allows individuals who use substances to know the substance that they are using. I thank you so much for your consideration of this critical legislation, and I hope that you see it through.
Lucilda Campos.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lucilda Campos. I'm a policy manager at Bold Futures, New Mexico. We support HB 52 because we believe it moves New Mexico a step closer to addressing some of the key components of rehabilitation and provides avenues to avoid the criminal legal system. I currently live in Albuquerque, but I was raised in Española Valley. I have seen how many in our community have been criminalized and trapped in the cycles of incarceration as they walk through their journey of recovery. We know that rehabilitation rarely initiates with full abstinence. Instead, it begins with use reduction. People should not be incarcerated for a health issue or for carrying life-saving supplies. Please vote yes on HB 52. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have the individual who's in the House Judiciary Committee room, and I understand I'm supposed to wait a moment for that individual to connect. But we're ready for you. Please introduce yourself. No. Well, I'll try again. I have another hand raised, Juliana Koob.
Sorry, Madam Chair. This is Juliana Koob, Madam Chair and members of committee, and on behalf of the New Mexico Behavioral Health Providers Association, we support House Bill 52.
Thank you. Eric Martinez.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Eric Martinez. I'm the registered lobbyist for New Mexico Treatment Services and Albuquerque Treatment Services. And what we're doing already is we're seeing a big amount of new patients come in testing positive for fentanyl when they don't even know they're taking fentanyl. So and things are getting pretty bad out there. So I think that we strongly support this piece of legislation and hope we get it through quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me try again for House Committee Room number 309. You're unmuted and you need to unmute on your end and then give us your feedback. I think that right now we're going to have to conclude public comment. We can't seem to fix that technical problem. And I want to go to our committee members. So let me see if I have any hands raised for committee members. I do. Representative Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I normally start when I speak about a bill that I'm a co-sponsor on by saying I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor. And it's a little hard for me to say that in this case because of the tragedies that we're trying to address, but certainly I want to commend my colleagues for working with the Department of Health to try to come up with some solutions to address the extraordinary epidemic that we have been faced with in the state and actually in the country as well. It's out of control. And I signed on to this bill for a very personal reason. And it's not unlike, I'm sure, some of the members of the audience and other members on the committee. About a year ago, one of my dear friends lost her son to a drug overdose. And it really has devastated all of us. And we need solutions for this. It's just killing families and communities and just devastating in so many ways. I went to the service for the young man, and he had many of his friends attended. And what really struck me in that service was when one young man stood up and they were talking about fentanyl and how deadly it was. And they were warning other young people in the audience about the need to avoid it at all costs and how dangerous it was and how careful people needed to be, young people needed to be, or frankly, all people needed to be when they were involved in substance, taking in of substances. And what really struck me after those discussions was what one young person raised his hand and he said, I lost 8 friends in the last year to drug overdoses attributable to fentanyl. And, I'm so pleased that we're coming forward with these kinds of tools. I hope it's not a perfect solution. Other things need to be done, like education, stopping the source of these drugs, so many other things. But I'm convinced that this will will help a lot in terms of saving lives and saving those who are impacted by substance abuse. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Chandler, and my condolences for your friend's loss. And I can see why you wanted to try to assist. Representative Ream, or is it Ream or Nybert who wants to speak?
Representative Ream, it's me.
Okay.
Madam Chair, and I support this bill, so please don't take this as I'm against the bill. I just see a couple things we need to think about in the rules and make Dr. Scrace aware of. This is me from when I was a narcotics officer. I see that the drug trafficker could use these test strips to go ahead and show the quality of his heroin or fentanyl, if you will, and use them in an improper way, not the way that we're intending to. I would also say that I would like to see that we make sure that we keep, if you've got a syringe full of a Schedule 1 narcotic, that it still remains a contraband. And those are my comments about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Ream. I'm told that the person in 309 finally is able to speak. So I'm going to, we've had some technical difficulties today, so I'm going to let that individual speak at this time. So if you would open that up. You're unmuted, so you can speak now. I'm really sorry, but we're just not able to hear that individual. I don't know what the problem is, but we will try to work this out. Can you try to unmute yourself now? I'm going to go back to members of the committee. Do members have more questions or comments of the presenters or their witnesses? I don't see any hands raised. Sometimes I feel like I'm the parent talking about what it was like in the olden days when I went to school and we had to walk 6 miles through the desert. But I was actually in the House as a freshman when this bill first passed. And I distinctly remember the debate because my son was a freshman in college and he was home from Chicago and was sitting on the speaker's rostrum and listened to the debate on the Harm Reduction Act. And at the time, the governor was Gary Johnson, and he was a very enlightened Republican governor, and he signed that into law. And we, let's see, just a moment. We were very happy to have that. And I can see clearly the act is in need of updating, but I just wanted to give you a little of the, remember back when your parents had to ride through the desert or walk through the desert to go to school. Representative Lewis, did you have a comment before we move on? Go ahead.
No, Madam Chair, I didn't know if there was a motion. If not, I make a motion for a due pass.
Okay, we have a motion for a due pass from Representative Lewis. And do we have a second? I'll second that motion. All right, is there anyone? Let's see here. Let me ask, I'm going to get you back on gallery view and see, is there anyone who objects to the due pass motion who's present now? And I want to make sure we see everyone who's here. So we have anyone objecting? If you would raise your hand. All right, so we have, let me tell you, Representative Alcone, Representative is Eli, Representative Cook. I'm trying to go alphabetically. Looks like we have all members present voting in the affirmative. So you do have a due pass, representatives, and Dr. Scraves, thank you very much for your work. I hope this can help a lot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say thank you to all those that testified today and the brave souls out there that are working in recovery. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on now to our next item, which is House Bill 69, I think. Wait, is this? Yes, House Bill 69. Wait a minute, I don't think it is. I think I'm sorry. House Bill 65 is first. 69 is our last bill of the evening. 65, and that would be Representative Romero and Representative Ortiz. And I think I have a text about who's coming. Andrea Romero and Representative Rubio. Okay. Let's make sure we've got all the right people here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep Rubio is also here, and our expert, Maria Griego, if you could let her in, and Tom Prettyman as well.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you. Let's see.
And Rep. Ortez does give her regrets. She had to rush back to Taos for a family emergency. So
I don't see Tom Prettyman, and I'm sorry, would you say that first one? Was it Maria Griego?
yes, please.
And I don't see her. Is she already on the panel? She's not.
I am, Madam Chair.
You're here. Okay, there you are. All righty. How about Tom Prettyman? Maybe I was just looking in the attendees and didn't see him.
He's already on there.
He's on. Okay, very good. So you have your experts. There's
Madam Chair, before we start, it does look like there's still folks in the panel mode from the previous bill that may need to be switched back over. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think so too. So, Representative Cook, are you here on this one? I'm not Representative Cook, not, pardon me, Tim Chavez Cook. Are you supposed to be in the attendees now?
All of our experts are here, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask, we'll go ahead with the presentation, and I'll ask our staff to try to move everyone else back who doesn't need to be here to the attendee list. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to this committee. You've heard this bill before. This is House Bill 65 that is modernizing our landlord-tenant law in the state. Since you were so instrumental last year in helping us tailor this bill to this year's understanding, I'll be brief about what it does. It expands the timeframes to allow tenants to be able to basically correct their rent money. So it gives them 11 days instead of 3 days, which is current law, to be able to pay their rent. It also allows for 14 to 21 days instead of 7 to prepare for court and get legal help. It also provides 15 to 20 days instead of 7 days to get new housing and move if evicted, which gives them additional time to move at the court's discretion. Finally, it allows, well, 2 other points. It gives the tenants the opportunity to pay and stay to avoid that eviction. So we know how difficult it is right now to find housing if evicted. As well, on the record, it makes it even harder. It also requires that the court summon to explain the tenant's rights and availability of rental assistance, which now we have many subsidies available. And finally, it would prevent landlords from refusing to renew a lease during a declared state of emergency, which is incredibly hard, as we know through this pandemic, when we're asking and our experts, Maria Griego from the Center for Law and Poverty, and Thomas Prettyman as well. So I will let them introduce themselves if that's okay.
That's just fine. Go right ahead.
Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I don't have much to say other than this legislation was vetted time and time again by this particular committee, and we're incredibly grateful for the time that was spent last session. We feel like this legislation today is the beginnings of really addressing a lot of the housing issues that we have here across the state, and we just ask for your support. Thank you.
Mr. Prettyman, Ms. Griego, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Maria Griego. I'm the Director of Economic Equity with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty and a supervising attorney there. I know I spoke with this committee last year, and so I am going to hold off on saying anything unless the representatives, the sponsors ask or the committee has specific questions, but I have plenty to say and I'm happy to be here and answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prettyman.
Hi, I'm Tom Prettyman. I'm from New Mexico Legal Aid, and I'm just here to answer any questions you may have about the bill. It was reached with the input of both tenant advocates like me and representatives of the Apartment Association in New Mexico, which is the leading landlords association. So just look forward to your hearing it.
Thank you. And I want to remind everybody, just in case you've forgotten or you don't have post-traumatic stress over last session, but this bill probably spent more time in Judiciary as House Bill 111. And what was so remarkable to me was the agreement reached by the parties and how it finally got moving. So with that, I would like to go to public comment. And we will do this with, again, 1 minute. And let me see, put your hand up if you want to speak for or against the bill. Okay, Michael Badio.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I know that you all have heard a lot about the current housing crisis in New Mexico and how that continues to grow. And I know you've heard a lot of numbers and statistics surrounding that, and I'm sure many of my colleagues and partners across New Mexico will share some of that with you this afternoon. I quickly just want to say, again, my name is Michael Barry. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Housing Action Coalition, and I am in strong support of this particular bill. It's a very important bill that we frankly just need to pass, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing to work towards this kind of alleviation for the state of New Mexico. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm going to stop here because I forgot to offer an opportunity for all participants, all attendees to indicate whether they're for or against the measure. So I'd like to take 20 seconds for a poll to go up on that, so we have a sense of how many folks are interested in weighing in today. Can we put that poll up for just 20 seconds? Is Mr. Montoya putting the poll up, Lisa? Okay, here we go. For 20 seconds, just indicate.
Is that one of yours? No. Okay.
Do we just leave it?
Yeah. The vote shall remove it.
I mean, but I support it. I won't speak on it.
Somebody needs to mute.
That's us. Hey, this is room 309. Can you guys hear us?
Yes, but hold on.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, we have 69% in favor and 31% in opposition. So let's go back to public comment. And I think we were starting with those who are in favor of the bill. And that was Mr. Badio spoke. So put your hand up if you're in favor of the bill. And then I'll come to those who are in opposition second. Okay, next I have Daniel Macy. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Daniel Macy, and I am the Community Relations Manager with the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. While this bill is not on MFA's legislative agenda, as approved by its Legislative Oversight Committee, MFA believes the COVID-19 pandemic has had unprecedented and extensive impacts on households across New Mexico. The passage of this bill will allow for greater flexibility by allowing more time to remedy delinquencies, find affordable housing, and potentially avoid homelessness. This bill will also ensure that individuals and families are protected from eviction during emergencies, including public health emergencies. MFA also understands that the bill sponsors worked very hard last general session to work with the New Mexico Apartment Association to address their concerns on this bill. And it appears to be a good compromise that benefits New Mexico's renter households. We thank the bill sponsors for bringing this attention to this issue of eviction and attempting to ease the burden of New Mexico's low to moderate income households. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kathleen Mosley. Kathleen Mosley. Okay, Randy Traynor.
Hello?
Oh, Kathleen?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Representative Chasey, members of the committee and sponsors, Representative Romero and Rubio. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kathy Mosley. I'm a retired community health nurse, master's in preventive medicine, and longtime asthma educator in New Mexico. And on behalf of New Mexico Public Health Association, I am supporting HB 65. Without a home, New Mexico residents become much more vulnerable to numerous health challenges. COVID, of course, chronic diseases, asthma, diabetes, substance abuse. And so I would just please ask committee members to support the initiative to maintain shelter for New Mexico residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Randy Traynor. I called your name. Are you ready to speak?
I am, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
That's
glitch this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Randy Traynor, registered lobbyist for the Apartment Association of New Mexico. First, I'd like to thank the committee in their wisdom last year with House Bill 111 in creating a collaborative process where all those who wished could sit at the table as equals and arrive at an agreement. House Bill 65 represents that agreement. Again, thank you to the committee. That was good work on your part. Lastly, on behalf of the Apartment Association of New Mexico, I'd like to express our support for House Bill 65. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Judge O'Connell.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Erin O'Connell, a judge in the Civil Division at the 2nd Judicial District Court. I speak to you today in my capacity as co-chair of the New Mexico Access to Justice Commission. The Access to Justice Commission is a statewide body that is dedicated to expanding and improving civil legal services in New Mexico. In my capacity as co-chair of ATJ, we support the expansion of the deadlines in the Uniform Owner-Resident Relations Act in House Bill 65, which will facilitate the court's ability to implement the AOC's new eviction diversion program and allow landlords and tenants to apply for and receive federal rental assistance funding currently available. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, Judge. Nice to see, or nice to have your voice with us. Jay Wilson.
Hi, yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and the rest of the committee. Thank you for speaking today. My name is Jay Wilson. I'm the president of the Albuquerque Bless Fund. As I'm sure we know, the CDC mandate was a godsend and a much needed support for families here in our community. And I want to say that the Albuquerque Bless Fund is in full support of this legislation. We believe that with housing prices going up 20% on average, many New Mexican families are finding that renting is the only viable source of staying home and staying off of the streets. We appreciate the collaboration which has taken place and making this legislation which addresses the realities facing the housing market and the families here in our state. Thank you for affirming the fact that housing saves lives and sustains the well-being of our communities and the families that live in them, and that these protections uplift everyday people. We encourage the cross-collaboration along party lines and appreciate your support for this bill.
Jack Corder.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jack Corder. I'm the president of the National Association of Residential Property Managers, Albuquerque chapter, and we have members all over the state of New Mexico. The Apartment Association speaks for the large apartment owners. The National Association of Residential Property Managers works with single-family homeowners that have rental properties that they rent out. Several things in this bill are not advantageous to the housing market. They're not advantageous to renters, and they're certainly not advantageous to the homeowner. We would like to have a seat at the table to speak on behalf of the over 12,000 to 15,000 single-family homeowners that are renting their properties out and express their displeasure with this bill. And on the part of the association, we urge you to vote against it.
Divya Shiv.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Divya Shiv with New Mexico Voices for Children, and I'm here in support of House Bill 65. I first want to thank the sponsors for their time and commitment to this bill. No family should have to face the prospect of housing instability and homelessness, especially during a pandemic. This bill is essential in ensuring that our state's laws are fair and compassionate to families who are struggling to stay securely housed. Given how short New Mexico's eviction process is, lengthening the eviction timeline is critical to making sure that families have the time to access rental and legal assistance. We strongly urge your support for House Bill 65. Thank you.
Erica Gallegos.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Erica Gallegos, Policy Director at OLE, and we stand in favor of House Bill 65 and view this as a racial justice issue. Housing issues and lack of access to affordable and safe housing options disproportionately affects Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The reality is that in the next few months, more than 43% of New Mexico renters could face eviction. For this reason, we urge committee members to vote in favor of House Bill 65. Thank you.
Thank you. Anita Cordova.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak in favor of House Bill 65. I'm with Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless, celebrating my 16th year doing this work this year. I urge you to modernize our housing code and increase housing stability for New Mexico's families. We need the stability now. House Bill 65 would prevent evictions and homelessness by expanding the days to the time frames allowed for tenants to avoid evictions if evicted, time to move out, and time to fight and prepare for court if they have to do that. It gives the tenants the opportunity to pay and stay, and requires court summons to explain tenants' rights and availability of rental assistance. I will add that these are rights that are afforded by landlords and others all the time, prevent landlords from refusing to renew a lease during a declared state of emergency. Again, all of these housing modernization codes would increase housing stability for families, and I urge you to pass it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Hutch Miller.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Hutchie Miller. I'm the Intergovernmental Coordinator for Santa Fe County. And I just want to briefly express our thanks on behalf of the Santa Fe County Commission, who supports this bill. And we thank the sponsors and the parties involved who are helping local governments address affordable housing and homelessness. Thank you.
Stephanie Straley.
Hello, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Stephanie Straley and I am Policy Committee Co-Chair for the New Mexico Public Health Association. I am speaking in full support for HB 65 on behalf of NMPHA. We believe housing is a social determinant of health, and we believe everyone should have the opportunity for secure housing as it directly impacts their well-being. We urge the committee to vote do pass on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Demetria Burrell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm speaking as a community member and a member of the working poor in Albuquerque, expressing my support for HB 65. And as someone who works in the education system, housed children perform better than children who are stressed and worried about their housing situation. It's not just parents who struggle, the children struggle too. And there are so many times where we want to pay our bills and take care of emergencies, and we just struggle because it's hard when there is 1 month at the end of the money. So having these resources to make sure that we all can stay housed there's not enough words to express how important it is. So I am speaking and asking that you please all support this bill.
Thank you. Bree Sillery.
My name is Bree Sillery, and I represent the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness, and I'm here to urge the support and quick passage of House Bill 65. Homelessness is increasing at a dramatic pace throughout New Mexico, with over 6,000 calls received per month at our organization from people experiencing homelessness or facing homelessness. We know that this legislation is critical to addressing the systemic flow of people into homelessness. Current timeframes for eviction do not allow for realistic time to apply for rental assistance. And by extending these timeframes, it is a critical step for our housing continuum to develop the statewide system to intervene before people become homeless. As people slip from housing insecurity into homelessness, it becomes exponentially more difficult to recover. This legislation will support the development of those systems that increase community and housing stability throughout all New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Dina or Deanna, and I don't have a last name. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Deanna Creighton and committee members. I work with community schools in Bernalillo County and with Amparo, a housing nonprofit, which supports families with school-aged children who are experiencing housing instability. Today, I speak as a community member in support of House Bill 65. I believe that in New Mexico, housing is a human right and that this value should guide how we create legislation and policy. This past year, we've seen many families slip into homelessness. Once an individual loses their stable home through eviction, this judgment of eviction becomes like a scarlet E, which follows them everywhere, making it more and more difficult to find adequate and affordable housing. This is sound legislation which extends the timeframes for evictions, among other tenant protections. And these protections are crucial in allowing resources and systems to intervene to support these families. I urge the committee to please vote in favor of House Bill 65. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, next, CVRC.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Frank Zubia, Director for the New Mexico Crime Victims Reparation Commission. We assist victims of violent crime with financial assistance across the state. We stand in support for HB 65 for the several hundred victims of sexual violence, family violence, and homicide under our rent and relocation program who will benefit from the passage of this bill. We ask that you pass it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm with GDR Property Solutions, and I am strongly against this bill. The state should streamline assistance. This is not a burden that should be on private citizens to ensure that people are not evicted. When somebody owns a home, oftentimes they rely on the income that comes from the rent. If the committee wants to move forward, or if the sponsors want to move forward with a bill like this, they should be including experts, not just on homelessness, but experts on the landlord side, including property managers and the attorneys that represent our trade groups. The economic impact that this type of bill will have will mean that landlords stop investing in New Mexico and they will take their money elsewhere, resulting in a decrease in rental units. So I'm strongly against this bill. Thank you.
I don't see any more hands raised in the attendees. I'm checking now. Oh, yes. Karen Whitlock, did you speak on this already, or was it the last one?
It was the last one, Madam Chair.
Okay, and what about Rachel Biggs?
Madam Chair, I've not gotten to speak yet. I'll be brief. Chairwoman and members of the committee, my name is Rachel Biggs with Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless. Immediate action is needed right now to ensure New Mexicans can maintain housing and that landlords can access the available rental assistance funds to address rent backlogs. COVID has increased the need for rental assistance, and the federal government responded in unprecedented ways to address this rent backlog. It would be irresponsible to not address the barriers to spending this money to ensure both landlords and tenants benefit. We must act now to ensure we can continue to leverage federal dollars and help our economy recover as quickly as possible. We urge your support of HB 65. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, this is.
I think we have a few more folks here. Lisa Christopherson.
Lisa Christopherson. I speak as a community member and as a former renter in New Mexico. I lived in an apartment complex on Alameda and Corrales Road when I first moved back to New Mexico after completing college. And after 5 years, the apartment complex was purchased by an outside company outside of New Mexico. I had paid rent early and on time for those 5 years. The rent was raised an exorbitant amount of money, and I was given a limited amount of time to find other housing. Unfortunately, as a teacher, I could not afford the rent they raised it to, but fortunately, I had resources and family members where I could store my stuff in the meantime while I was trying to find housing. I've had friends in similar situations who were not blessed with those same benefits of resource and family, and it has an undue burden when those scenarios occur and then eviction results. And so I would, Madam Chair and committee members, I would strongly ask that you would support HB 65 and help those folks in similar situations. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the GAAR, Greater Albuquerque Area Realtors.
Yes, Madam Chair, it's Kent Cravens, CEO of the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors. And we're speaking against this bill for a few reasons. The cumulative effect of all the changes, as has been said, will have a dramatic effect on people who don't own apartment complexes and many other apartments or homes that they can offset expenses with, and will have a devastating effect on the amount of rentals available over the long term, just because of that fact. And Madam Chair and members of the committee, I appreciate you hearing this bill. I always appreciate a good dialogue on something like this, but I believe that although there were attempts made to get some players at the table, I'm sure that these folks that I'm speaking of were not represented in those conversations, and we'd just like you to give that some thought. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have Vic.
Thank you so much. I am in complete support of this bill. Our families deserve safe and affordable housing and guidelines that make sure that people are able to stay in their homes. I have always been a renter. I still rent. I have had both apartments during the pandemic be sold to out-of-state realtors, and I've had to move 2 times already. So any landlord who's having trouble with this should truly budget better. Thank you.
Mark Fiedler.
There we go. Hi. I'm going to go quick. Page 12, section 6 assumes if a landlord raises rent or does not wish to renew a lease, that it can be deemed retaliatory if, among other things, the tenant has made a complaint to a government housing agency or a utility company within the prior 6 months. Nothing is mentioned about the complaint being found to be true, just that a complaint was made. A complaint to a utility company might never come to the knowledge of the landlord. This flies in the face of contract law and due process and needs to be properly and reasonably rewritten. Second, the declared emergency clause on page 21 is overly broad. We have been in an emergency status for 2 years now. Landlords, especially individuals who rely upon rental income to pay not only their rentals mortgages, but for their personal living expenses as well, have already been hurt to the point of desperation by moratoriums. The consequence of passing this bill would be a reduction in available rental housing and rental application standards, making qualifying more difficult. I don't believe this is the intention, but that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
Randy Valverde.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Randy Valverde. I am a registered lobbyist for the New Mexico Realtors Association. The Realtors have some technical concerns with the bill, starting on page 15, lines 9 to 16. There's an order of proof for retaliation there that does not require the resident to prove retaliation. Rather, they must only prove that they engaged in protected activity. And then the burden shifts to the owner to prove that the resident did not engage in protected activity. And we believe that that would be difficult, if not impossible, for an owner to prove. We think the order of proof should focus on whether actual retaliation occurred. And then moving to page 14, the addition of allowing complaints to a gas or electric utility, the concern outlined before, is especially troubling in light of that order of proof. We've notified the sponsor of these concerns and we look forward to working with her.
Thank you. Damon Maddox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Damon Maddox, the president of the New Mexico Association of Realtors. Piggybacking on to what our lobbyist just said, in addition to that, the number of days required to go through the eviction process, extending it out is way too far. We do understand that this act needs to be looked at and revised. We would love a seat at the table to help this happen in a productive way. We are opposed of it as of right now. Thank you.
Bill Reed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committees, my name is Bill Reed. I'm a licensed qualified real estate broker and a licensed general contractor. I build apartment complexes. I'm also a property owner, a property manager, and I've been in the multifamily business in Albuquerque for 20 plus years. This bill is heavily weighted towards the tenant, as former Senator Craven said. It doesn't seem that anyone from our side has been represented regarding the drafting of this bill. This bill will definitely result in the reduction of new units coming online. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at what's happened with states that have passed rent control. Basically, developers have backed out of those states. There's an incredible shortage of affordable housing in Albuquerque, affordable rentals, as you know. I believe that the Uniform Owner Resident Relation Act properly represents tenants. Are there landlords that operate outside those guidelines? Absolutely. Let's take a look at those and not use the shotgun approach. I'm strongly opposed to this bill, and thank you for your time.
David Jaramillo. Go ahead, David. Well, I'll skip to the next one and we'll come back to Mr. Hoddama. Justin Rogers.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Justin Rogers. I'm with Renters Coalition of Albuquerque and OLE. And I am in support of this bill because as a renter myself, I know the imbalance of power that there is right now. People are saying that the bill is balanced in favor of tenants over landlords, but there's no balance currently where on one side you can get kicked out of your home and be put on the streets or in unsafe situations with family members or COVID situations. And on the other side, having to wait a few more days for rent could result in landlords losing some investment income, which is what owning properties for rentals is. It's an investment that carries risks with it. And so I hope that you can move this bill along to protect people from the more serious effects of homelessness and housing insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you. David Hoddama. You're unmuted on my end.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to testify this afternoon. David Hoddama, registered lobbyist for the city of Albuquerque. This important legislation addresses a real crisis in housing in the entire state of New Mexico, but specifically in Albuquerque. The folks that we see in our tent communities are not just, even though many of them are suffering from mental illness, drug addiction, or other issues on the margins, many of those folks are families and young people and individuals who have lost their ability to have housing due to the difficulties that this bill will address. Contrary to what my colleagues who work in this building say from the Realtors Association, this is not a new bill. This is a bill that was looked at last year. All parties were at the table. This is an agreement. I believe Randy Traynor spoke to that earlier. That agreement was born out of the hard work of this committee and the direction of this committee. So this is nothing new to anybody, and this is an urgent matter that needs addressing today. Thank you.
And our last speaker will be Pak Choi.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Pak Choi. I have a small property in Albuquerque's International District. HB 65 makes many needed upgrades, but the huge increase in the time to remove problem tenants, I think ultimately reduces the affordable housing in New Mexico. Every landlord really wants to minimize turnover and will only turn to the court process after working residents to address issues. In practice, the evictions in Albuquerque already take 30 to 45 days. When you look at sections 4D, 8A, 9A, 10A, all together, these add at least 45 days to the eviction process. That means evictions will take at least 3 months. This extra time takes away housing from people who want to be good neighbors, follow the community rules, and pay what they promise. And it forces landlords to raise rents on all the other residents to cover the lost rent and extra damage that occurs when evictions are drawn out. The extra time provisions in this bill work against the availability of affordable housing in New Mexico. Modernize, yes. Special provisions for emergencies, yes. But leaves the dates unchanged so that we can keep the housing crisis from getting worse. Thank you.
Okay, and that was it for public comment, but we do have the one of the panelists is in House 309, and I want to give, I think it's not sure who it is, who's one of the panelists, who's an expert who needs to speak.
No, it's the public. It's the public.
Oh, it's still public comment?
It's the public in the committee room. That's what 309 is.
I guess what confused me is your message said they're in the panelists. So
yeah, they're sitting in the panelists because that's the only way they can talk.
Okay, let's let House Committee Room 309 speak.
Okay, yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. We do have someone here in the audience that would like to speak on the last bill. On the last couple of bills.
But not this one?
Not this current one, it was the one previous.
Okay, we'll get that person later then.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go back to the sponsor, and then I'm going to take committee questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple things that we wanted to clear up. If Tom Prettyman can respond to the retaliation comments that were made, we just want to preempt any confusion about what was said, if that's all right.
And let me ask the person who's handling our public comment timer to please take that screen down. Thank you. And I want to be able to see the speakers at this time. Mr. Prettyman. Go ahead, Mr. Prettyman.
Okay. I wanted to address first the comments about the timeline for the court process. And yes, the House Bill 65 does expand some of the timelines, and that was a compromise reached by the parties in drafting the bill. But it does include a carve out. The one commenter spoke of removal of tenants who may be causing damage. Well, the bill does provide that in the case of tenants who are found to be engaging in disruptive or violent behavior, or dangerous, I'm sorry, disruptive or dangerous behavior, that the judge may have them removed on an expedited timeline as little as 7 days. So that was an attempt to address those while still providing lengthened timelines for tenants whose violation arises from non-payment of rent.
Thank you very much. Sponsors, did you want to say anything else, or shall I go to the committee?
Madam Chair, I was just hoping that Tom could respond specifically to the retaliation provision and how that would work real quickly, if that's all right.
Yes.
So already retaliation is a very, very weak provision in the current Uniform Owner-Resident Relations Act, and specifically, it's very weak because the knowledge of the retaliation is with the landlord, and there's no discovery or no way for tenants in eviction proceedings to get landlord documents in most cases. So it's very difficult, impossible for a tenant to prove retaliation. And we want to create a safe harbor for tenants to engage in protected activity, like calling the gas company if they smell a gas leak or if the stove is leaking. So what the retaliation provision does is it sets up an order of proof that was requested by representatives of the landlords for proving retaliation. One, the tenant proves that they've engaged in the protected activity, and then the burden shifts to the landlord to show that they had another basis for terminating the tenant's tenancy. And that was suggested by the apartment association. And then the burden shifts back to the tenant to prove that, in fact, that the asserted basis for terminating the tenancy was pretextual, that it in fact was retaliatory. So we don't think this is onerous to owners. It's still going to be very difficult for tenants to prove retaliation, because the next section after retaliation creates a safe harbor for landlords. No matter whether the tenant has engaged in the protected activity in the last 6 months, if the tenant is otherwise in violation of the lease, say they haven't paid rent or they've committed some kind of non-rent violation that is grounds for terminating the tenancy, the landlord may go ahead without fear of being accused of retaliation and terminate the tenancy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prettyman. I'm going to go to the committee now, and first, is it Representative Nybert, who want to make sure which one of you wishes to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just want to kind of walk through the bill. I do have a number of questions, and my first question, we'll look at the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3. So I have a clear understanding of the change that results from the deletion of the current language to the proposed language, and that is the 10% cap on the late fee. As it currently provides, it's 10% for each rental period that is in default. So if you have January, February, March rent that's in default, rent's $1,000 a month. 10% of January is $100. 10% of February is $100. 10% of March is $100. You have a $300 late fee that could be imposed. Under the proposal, it says not to exceed 10% of the monthly rent payment. So in the proposed language, is it the intent and also the actual provision that the maximum late penalty for those 3 months of late rent payments would be $100, being 10% of the $100 per month? Am I reading the proposal correctly, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, our experts will respond to that. It's okay.
Representative Nyberg, Madam Chair, the purpose of that provision is this. It does not change that the cap on the late fees is 10% of the monthly rent. So as the representative said, that if the monthly rent is $1,000, then the maximum late fee charged per month is $100. What it does is clarify an issue that comes up in the courts, and different people had different opinions. So it was written into the bill what the rule is. For some tenants, their rent might be $1,000, but because of a subsidy, say from a housing authority with a voucher, their portion of the rent might be, say, $400, and the housing authority pays $600. So the total rent is $1,000. The resident's portion is $400. So if this resident does not pay her rent for a month, the maximum penalty for this resident will be 10% of the $400, their portion, $40. So the degree of penalty is proportionate to the degree of harm. So if a tenant pays a larger share of their rent, then their late fee is going to be larger. If the tenant pays a small share of the rent, then their late fee is going to be smaller.
Madam Chair and Representative and Mr. Pettyman, let's disregard the second sentence. I'm focused solely on the first sentence. And the testimony was that this was to clarify it. To me, if it is clarified, or if you want more clear language as to what the intent was of being the percentage per month, the existing language is much more clear than the change, because it says an amount not to exceed 10% of the monthly rent payment period. To me, if you're in default for 3 months, the maximum late penalty in my example would be $100, not $300. Under the current language, which I find to be very clear, the late penalty that could be charged for those 3 months would be $300, being $100 for each of those 3 months of default. So if your testimony is that the late penalty should be $100 for each of those 3 months, I would suggest that you go back to the original language and strike the inserted language, monthly rent payment, and go back to how it reads now, because I find that much more clear and consistent with your testimony. And then we can talk about the second sentence. Would you agree with me, sir? Or Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, if Tom can respond.
Well, I thought the original language wasn't clear either. So and I'm sure minds could differ as whether the new language is clear. However, I'm saying what the intent is, and the intent is to specifically address that situation where the tenant's rent is subsidized by a government agency. I found the original language not clear, and in my experience, judges have gone different ways on that language. So that's what I can say.
Madam Chair and Representative, I do not know how a court could misinterpret the existing language. I just find that unfathomable. And so if the intent is to have a late penalty of 10% of the rent payment for each rental period, the existing language is much more clear. And I guess at the conclusion of this, maybe the lawyers on this committee could determine which one's more clear, and maybe we need an amendment in that regard. So maybe we'll come back to that. I can find a lot of ambiguities in statutes, but this certainly would not be one sentence that I would find an ambiguity in. It is very clear. 10% of the total rent payment for each rental payment that the resident is in default. That tells me precisely in my example, if you're in default for 11 or for 3 months, you pay 10% of each one of those months rent, 10% of the rent for each one of those months, and you add it up, and it's pretty easy. And if the testimony is that that's the intent with respect to this legislation, I certainly prefer the language as it's currently written. The second sentence then talks about the proration with respect to the situation that Mr. Pettyman talked about, and that is if you have subsidized rent, you're only paying a late penalty on your portion of the rent that you owe, not the portion that the government agency is paying. Madam Chair and Representative, in that regard, does the government agency directly pay the landlord, or are those payments that are made to the tenant under the guise that that money will then be forwarded to the landlord?
Chair, our experts, if that's okay.
Madam Chair, Representative Nybert, there would be two situations that I think of. One is where the tenant has a voucher and the tenant pays their share directly to the landlord, and the government, generally a local housing authority, pays its share directly to the landlord. Tenant pays to the landlord and the government pays to the landlord. Another would be multifamily properties, which might be subsidized by the U.S. Department of Agriculture under the Rural Housing Program, or HUD. And these are generally owned by private property owners, and the tenant pays their share directly to the property owner, the landlord, and HUD or USDA pays the other share directly to the private landlord.
And so, Madam Chair and Representative, in no case would the tenant receive the subsidy for the rental payment and be responsible for passing that on to the landlord, if I understand the testimony.
Madam Chair, Representative Nybert, that's correct. Most of these subsidies go directly to the landlord. They don't go to the tenant.
Well, Madam Chair and Representative, the word most gives me a little pause for concern because
If there's a representative, if there's something that does not do that, can you re-clarify?
are you asking me because I don't know anything about how this
From our experts, sorry, Madam Chair, Representative, are there any government agencies that don't go directly to the landlord?
Madam Chair, Representative Romero or Representative Nybert, no, they pay directly to the landlord.
then if that's the situation, I concur. I would have a problem if the money went to the tenant and then goes to the landlord, because the tenant could be receiving those funds, not paying the landlord. And it seems to me that the late penalty would then apply to the whole, not just the part. But if 100% of these types of subsidies go to the landlord directly, then I guess I don't have a lot of heartburn about only applying the late penalty to the portion owed by the tenant. Some of these things are things that were held over from last year. The receipt. Over on page 6 and 7, at the bottom, paragraph E on page 7, we've changed the standard, Madam Chair and Representative, have we not? The current statute requires the owner to act in bad faith. And now we have stricken that language, and we want to basically simply find that the owner who retains the deposit, I guess, and just simply knowing. And I suppose that probably means, or should have known, is probably going to be the standard. But why is there a change in the standard in paragraph E, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, Representative, this is to clarify what bad faith means, exactly what you're saying, just to make it really clear, so it's not subject to any interpretation of what bad faith means. It's to just make it what the actual penalty is for someone who violates, not returning the deposit to a renter.
So the word knowing, is that the actual knowledge of the landlord, or is that going to be deemed maybe a reasonable landlord standard?
Madam Chair, precisely, Madam Chair, Representative, that's the knowing is to the landlord and to that standard that you're talking about.
The landlord's actual knowledge.
Correct, Madam Chair, Representative.
Okay. Over on page 8, line 23, I see the word in the current statute, which has not been deleted. It says the notice shall state the owner's intention, but up in lines 21 and 22, it says the owner may terminate the rental agreement. So if the owner chooses to terminate the rental agreement, that would be more than an intention. They have put an end to the agreement, have they not?
Madam Chair, Representative, I'd like Tom to respond to that. It's a great question.
I agree. It could be some inconsistency there. I think that it would be read to mean that the owner may choose to terminate, but first they have to give the notice of intention to terminate. And if the tenant tenders the full amount due within the 11 days, then the owner may not terminate pursuant to this subsection. So I think it's a preface of what's to come. Here's the termination process. Notice of intent to terminate, and give the tenant 11 days to cure. And then when the 11 days pass, the owner may terminate pursuant to the subsection if the tenant is not tendered, but the owner may not terminate if the tenant has tendered the full amount due.
So that's really my point, Madam Chair and Representative, is that the termination is only effective after he sends a notice of intent to terminate, and there's no action, timely action within the 11 days after written notice is made. So the notice says, I presume, if you don't pay within the next 11 days of receipt of this notice, the rental agreement is terminated. Am I understanding that correct, Madam Chair and Representative?
I believe so, Madam Chair, Representative.
Okay. And then if the payment's not made within those 11 days, then we have some duties. It says resident shall deliver possession of the dwelling or seek redress in court. And you know, it seems to me that if you don't pay in the 11 days, what is the or seek redress in court? What, that they don't have to pay? Do they have to post a bond to file the suit? Or is this, oh, I can just file suit and that will forestall my having to pay?
Madam Chair, Representative, I would just say that I think all of the above, the allowance for redressing a situation where maybe a tenant did pay and the landlord may not be honoring that payment. I mean, there could be a number of issues that may need redressing in that relationship. And so it seems, reasonable to us that you would have the opportunity to present a case against, an eviction if you did pay, or if there was a circumstance in which the dispute needed redress in court.
Okay, Madam Chair and Representative, I'm not a landlord-tenant lawyer, so some of these words don't mean a lot to me, but it says, can seek redress in court in response to the owner's action for a writ of restitution. I didn't see where the owner had to file an action. The owner was supposed to get possession of the unit or receive payment within those 11 days. So what is an owner's action for writ of restitution, first of all, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, Representative, I'll let our experts respond to that.
Madam Chair, Representatives. So when a tenant receives a 3-day notice, an 11-day notice of non-payment under the proposed statute, they have a choice. They can pay or they can get out. Or if they believe that the money's not owed, then they wait for the owner's action for writ of restitution. And that's the complaint that the owner files with the court, usually a magistrate court or the metropolitan court, to evict a tenant. And they can present their defenses to the judge, and the judge decides who's right.
So, Madam Chair and Representative, a writ of restitution is the action to evict the tenant, if I understand the testimony correctly?
Yes. It's a petition for writ of restitution, and the a writ is a piece of paper signed by the judge telling the sheriff to give restitution, which is some lawyer's word for eviction.
Okay.
Madam Chair and Representative Ream and sponsors, if I may interject, I think I can add something to this. Representative Ream, the reason that particular provision was added in is because oftentimes tenants don't know that they have the opportunity to go to court. So they get oftentimes the statutory notice for non-payment of rent simply says, pay this amount due by X date or your lease will be terminated. And they don't understand that they have the opportunity to go in front of a court. And an example where a tenant might want to go to court is if, for example, the tenant has abated rent, meaning they've given the landlord notice that something in their house, in their unit needs to be fixed. They've given the landlord 7 days to fix it. And they said, if you don't fix this within 7 days, I'm exercising my right to abate a portion of the rent. The landlord doesn't fix it. And so then there's a dispute as to what is owed, right? So the landlord is saying you owe for the full month. And the tenant is saying, no, I don't. I only owe for, the month minus what I was allowed to abate. So that's a case where there might be a dispute as to what is owed. And that's why that provision was added, so the tenants know they can go to court. The lease isn't just automatically terminated.
Madam Chair and Representative, if I heard the testimony correct, there were 3 options. Pay, you get out, even though you live there for at least 11 days for free, or you respond to an action that was filed by the owner to remove you from the premises. That to me still doesn't tell the tenant that you can file suit. Did I miss something, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, if our experts can respond.
And let me just point out, because it might be confusing to folks responding, it's Representative Nybert right now who's asking the questions.
Madam Chair, Representative Nybert, in almost all situations, it's going to be the owner filing an action for a writ of restitution. So the tenant's remedy is to respond to that action. If they want to dispute the amounts owed, or that any amounts owed, or that they properly abated rent, the proper way to do that is to respond to the owner's action for writ of restitution.
Okay, that's as I understood the testimony, but then the other testimony was that this was to give the tenant notice that they could file suit, and I just didn't catch that in the first go around, so I appreciate that clarification. So if the payments made within the 11 days, then everything's good. The term of the lease continues, and that the parties go about their business, I suspect, for the duration of the term. Over on page 13, and this is really section 6 of the bill, which begins on the bottom of page 12 and then goes for several pages. I certainly understand how a landlord who threatens to bring an action is a concern, because I see that as coercion. If the landlord is, out there browbeating the tenant, and if you don't do this, I'm going to take you to court. I understand that, but it strikes me a little bit odd that in line 4, a resident may prove retaliation if an owner brings an action. The threatening I'll concede, but bringing the action, the owner is not retaliating. The owner is bringing an action before the court to resolve a dispute. And so I don't understand how bringing an action before a court and having the court weigh the merits of each party's case is in and of itself a retaliatory event. So, Madam Chair and Representative, could you explain how one availing themselves of the judicial process, how that becomes retaliatory?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let our experts respond, but I think in general, if the resident can prove that it's retaliatory when they bring an action, it just allows them to respond to that order that's been filed with the court. So I'll let our experts respond, but that's the intent of this.
Madam Chair, Representative Nye, Representative Romero, I would respectfully disagree. I believe that also bringing an action is retaliation. If could be retaliation if these protected activities have taken place in the last 6 months. Given the often the power imbalance between an owner and a tenant, I think many owners feel that it's very easy to remove a tenant by court process. So, and that many tenants won't think to, they have difficulty raising defenses in court. And therefore, I think it's important that we know that the owners bringing an action to an evicted tenant can also be retaliatory.
Madam Chair and Representative, I'm going to have a hard time getting my head around this one because to me, our entire judicial system set up to resolve disputes between parties in a manner that puts people, the courts certainly aren't going to hopefully favor one over the other. And I think the court system is there to try to resolve problems and of the court system to resolve differences is something that I think we ought to encourage than, I guess, leaving it up to threatening or coercive behavior, which I think this whole bill was drafted to try to prevent. And so if there's if the owner is bringing it, doesn't have a case, then the court's number one going to throw it out. And if it's really egregious, there's probably some causes of action that may exist that the tenant can pursue for that maybe extreme conduct. But I just find bringing the action, almost all legislation that we pass is to get people who have a dispute over something to get them to resolve those things and avail themselves of the judicial process if that's the way it can be resolved. And so I'm really concerned about the tying to retaliation, the bringing of an action that's intended to resolve maybe potential disputes. And that I find to be pretty outrageous in here and really concerned with that aspect of it.
Representative, if I might just respond about the sort of the process of how that works when it comes to a lot of these renters who end up being pro se in court. Even the threat of having to enter into a courtroom, being that you have spent many hours, months, years of your life in a courtroom, folks that are even threatened with having to go there, with the time, effort, energy that they may have to do. If someone's basically hanging that over their head, where this is what you're going to have to deal with if you want to, defend yourself in any sort of way, that could be one of the methods that, folks who have the resources and the wherewithal to do that can threaten as well. And so folks that are in that vulnerable position will often not want to have to, defend themselves, costs resources. If they want to hire a lawyer, many of them cannot. So having to present themselves in court, if you've been to, eviction hearings, can be extremely intimidating and often part of the process that is one of those forms of retaliation that can be felt. So, this is why it's in there as far as what we understand with part of how the process works at this point in time. And I just want to, give light to how the process is currently functioning in that way.
Madam Chair and Representative, you're giving me entirely too much credit, because I suspect that you may have more court experience than I, because I don't even, when I go to the courthouse, it's to go to the county clerk's office, not to court. So that's a whole different story. But the whole matter of imbalance, the courts are there to I think do what's right, and I think that the owners of real property who lease their property out to others should also have some due process rights, and part of that is the ability to bring an action for breach of their written contract. And if all of a sudden their ability to bring a dispute before a court is deemed to be retaliatory, that to me is just an area that I don't think we as the state ought to be headed.
Representative Nyberg, would you mind if Representative Alcone asks a question on that point?
Madam Chair, I wish I had a good retort for Representative Alcone, because he rarely pats me on the back, but I will yield a question to the Judge Alcone.
I'm sorry, Representative David. I'm just thinking that it's just not in there correctly, is what I'm thinking. Because you see the section there, when you go to 1 and then it goes to 2, it goes on to explain why the resident may prove retaliation. So if the owner threatens to bring an action for possession, somehow or another, what it is saying, if the resident has within the previous six months complained, organized to become a member, et cetera, A, B, C, D. Somehow or another, the wording is not right. An owner brings or threatens to bring an action for possession because the resident has within the previous 6 months. It's just not written right. And that's what that's all about. It's not because the owner brings the action for possession, it's because the owner brings the action for possession because of the following reasons. Is what it, like I say, the wording is just totally wrong.
We're stuck with the words that are on the piece of paper.
I know. And I understand that. I've been looking at it and trying to figure it out myself. And when you look at it, that's exactly what they're trying to say, but they didn't say it. It needs to be corrected. It needs to be corrected, is all I can say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, the fact of the matter is, a resident may prove retaliation if an owner brings the action and, for instance, complain to the gas company about the functioning or safety of a mechanical device.
Yes.
So that's retaliation, and yet the owner doesn't even know that the tenant contacted the gas company. And yet the owner's found to have retaliated because they're bringing an action for non-payment of rent. And the tenant says, well, a month ago, I contacted the gas company. Well, again, those should be things that the court sorts out, and it should not be an issue that all of a sudden moves the owner from a party that brings an action to a retaliatory landlord. And that's my big beef here.
You're correct, Representative Nybert. It's just not in there correct. You are right. It's just that what they were trying to do is not what they did. As a next judge, I could sit there and say, what the hell am I supposed to do next?
Madam Chair, if I knew anything about courtroom procedure, I would ask the court to take judicial notice of the fact that Judge Alcone said that I was right. So, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I make a point on this point?
Sure.
Madam Chair, if he's going to say I'm right.
So I think well, what Representative Nybert, Madam Chair, is saying is correct, right? That retaliation will be established if an owner does any of the things enumerated there. Threatening to bring an action, filing a complaint, decreasing services, increasing rent. I mean that, and I think, and the person has, among other things, complained to a utility during the previous 6 months regarding the functioning or safety of a mechanical device. I mean, I think that is what it says. I don't agree, though, Madam Chair, that there's a problem with the wording of Section 1. I mean, that's how you always see these sorts of statutes written when we're talking about creation of a rebuttable presumption, right? So you're laying out here the elements of when a rebuttable presumption would arise. And so if the owner does any of the things enumerated in Section 1, and the resident has done any of the things enumerated in the subsections of 2, then you have created a rebuttable presumption of retaliation. And I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's just what it says. I do have a question when we get to it about subsection H, about the complaints.
Sorry.
But I don't think that it's.
Let me try to fix this.
I couldn't hear what
Madam Chair, you probably need to mute your.
I'm trying to fix this. Sorry, folks. Lisa, can you get some technical assistance for us on this?
We're checking.
Trying to. How can we mute somebody who we can't find?
Not in the hallway.
Do you think it's in the committee room?
Maybe.
No. I'm so sorry, everyone. Not sure what's going on there. Representative Nybert, I think you can continue now. Representative Nybert, you're on mute.
I don't know how I just took me off on mute 3 times. Thank you, Madam Chair. The fact I somewhat disagree with the speaker in that this doesn't set up a rebuttable presumption. It just says the resident may prove retaliation if this and this occur. Yeah, but again, I think that bringing the action to have it resolved should not be an aspect of the retaliatory event, because I think that's what we would want. But moving on, let's look at page 14, lines 11 through 14. And again, this goes back to what I just stated a few moments ago. If the tenant complains to the gas company, electric company, water company, whatever, those complaints can be made without knowledge to the landlord that complaint has been filed or made, and so we're holding the landlord as potentially being retaliatory for an event that they do not know about. And so it seems to me that there ought to be some requirement that information get that the landlord be informed of that event, for that to be a component of a finding of retaliation. Over on page 15, lines 9 through 16, I believe maybe one of the commenters talked a little bit about this. Says the order of proof for an action, and it sets up this order of proof and shifts the burden to the owner to prove that the protected activity did not occur, which in my mind would be almost impossible to prove. Proving a negative is oftentimes impossible. And so I really grapple with this particular paragraph and the shifting of burden, and whether or not the owner would ever be able to prove that the protected activity did not occur. You know, how do I prove that the tenant did not contact the gas company? How do I prove that they didn't, write a letter? Maybe it got lost in the mail or something. But I mean, how do you prove some of those things? And I just don't know how we get to that point, which causes a problem for the landlord then, because they will be deemed to be retaliating against the tenant in those cases. Over on page 20, and I'm going to be looking at lines 17 and 18. There's language that allows a resident to make a first partial payment within 5 days of filing a notice of appeal. What is a partial payment? It's not full payment, obviously, but how much is a partial payment? Can they pay $1 of the $1,000 rent, or what is the intention, Madam Chair and Representative, with respect to what is a partial payment?
Madam Chair, our experts to respond.
Madam Chair, representatives, I'd refer to the beginning of Section B. The partial payment is an amount equal to the rental amount that should come due from the day following the judgment through the end of that rental period.
So, Madam Chair and Representative, is it the full amount?
Madam Chair, representatives, when a tenant files an appeal, they may obtain a stay of that eviction as long as they pay ongoing post-judgment rent. So if the judgment date is mid-month, the first payment that they're going to pay will be a partial month, and that has to be paid within 5 days after filing the appeal. And then each month afterwards, the tenant pays their timely full payment until the appeal is done. And it sets up a process whereby the owner, the appellee, can obtain the writ of restitution, the eviction order, if the tenant does not comply with this section.
Okay, Madam Chair and Representative and Mr. Pettyman, you're going to have to walk me through this so that I will understand it. Let's go back to my example. Rent's $1,000 a month. They initially did not pay for 3 months. It goes through this process, and I will presume that for the next year, there's no money being paid to the landlord during the time that they're squabbling in court. So let's say we have 15 months of rent that has not been paid, and 15 months of late penalties that have not been paid either. So they then take this matter up on appeal. So walk me through what has to be paid when they file the appeal, and what do they have to pay from the middle of the month when the appeal's filed through the end of the appeal process.
Madam Chair, representatives, I'd first start off, but very few landlords will wait 15 months of unpaid rent to take it to court. But if
no, in my example, they only waited 3 months. It's been 15 months before they got through the court process, and now they are the tenant is appealing it. So there's 15 months of unpaid rent.
When a tenant appeals, presumably the tenant lost and is going to be evicted. The judge enters a judgment and it's mid-month. Let's say the judgment is January 15th, and the tenant files their appeal on time. Within 5 days of filing the appeal, the tenant has to pay 16 days. There's 31 days in January. It'll be a little more than $500, a little more than half the rent within 5 days of filing the appeal. And then on the first of each month, February 1st, March 1st, etc., the tenant has to pay their $1,000 of the total rent if they want to stay in the unit during the appeal.
Okay, and so Madam Chair and Representative, the 15 months is still, for lack of a better term, still held in abeyance pending the results of the appeal. Is that a proper understanding, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, Representative, that's the correct understanding. Yes.
Okay, so the first partial payment is only the prorated rent for the rest of the month, for that month that's due, doesn't count late penalties or any of the prior amounts that are due. Well, I don't like it, but I understand it now, so thank you. And then over on page 22, beginning really the lines 1 through 9 on that page, basically says that the owner shall not refuse to renew or seek to terminate any rental agreement that expires during or for 30 days after the termination of the declaration of an emergency, etc. Again, this really forces landlords to enter into contracts or extend contracts maybe that they're not wanting to extend. So if you have the termination date during that emergency, you're saying that you can't bring that contract to an end. You have to extend it for the duration of that emergency, etc. Am I reading that correctly, Madam Chair and Representative?
Madam Chair, Representative, that is correct. However, if the owner did want to sell their property or had a reason to inhabit the property, they can do that as well. We've heard of, families needing to make space for their other relatives, etc. That's all current law.
And again, just some concerns regarding the forcing people into contractual provisions that they've not entered into. That's a concern. Madam Chair, I too would like to point out that, and I think I said this last year, that at the end of the day, the results of this type of legislation, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of particularly small landlords that exist from around the state, it's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's either going to cause them to sell properties and get out of this business altogether, or it's going to cause them to have to increase the rent on all of their tenants to deal with the additional burden that may be placed upon by a minority of tenants to recoup and recover those costs. And so all the testimony from the public earlier about attending to homelessness issues and keeping people in their apartments and other things, I question seriously whether this type of legislation results in the goals that were enunciated. And frankly, I think that this type of legislation will have the inverse effect of causing rents to go up across the board, number one. And number two, it may constrain the rental market if enough landlords decide to get out of this particular business, and probably has an impact on smaller tenants or smaller landlords with very few properties, as opposed to the big apartment complexes that you may see in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and other large cities. But certainly the problem in those communities that have a limited number of rental properties. With that, Madam Chair, I thank you for the time to answer the questions. I thank the representative and Mr. Pettiman for providing the information. And I seriously do believe that over on page 3, the existing language on page 3, lines 1 and 2 is much more clear than changing that language to monthly rent payment, because I think that if the intent is to have a late rental payment affixed to each month, that language makes it now ambiguous, where it was very clear before. And I'd be happy to make a motion to amend, but the representatives may just want to think about it. And if they want me to make the motion, I'm happy to make it. But otherwise, they should ponder that and let me know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I just one response, we've already seen rents rising across the country, in particular in New Mexico in our urban areas, some areas up to 40%. Landlords have already been turning over their homes and selling them for immense amount of profits right now, seeing the housing market across the state. The fact that this is not in place, unfortunately, leaves a lot of people up to eviction currently without having the emergency order and that last bit that we were just discussing. They're very vulnerable to increasing rents and, of course, the pandemic. So that said, Madam Chair, Representative, I just unfortunately don't see merit in not having this law in place to protect those folks, given what we've already seen happen across the state and the nation.
Thank you, Representative. Speaker Egoff, you're next.
Thank you. I am doing double duty. I've got 2 Zooms going, so hopefully folks can hear me. I've got the right earpiece. Madam Chair and Representative, could you, I just have one question just about one provision, and it's in section 6, page 14, lines 11 through 14. That's where we're talking about retaliation if the owner does any one of the enumerated things in section 1. And then it says, and the tenant has complained to a gas, electric, or water utility about the functioning or safety of a mechanical device, utility service, or owner supplied appliance. And that provision, Madam Chair, strikes me as perhaps a little bit of an overstep in favor of a tenant. And maybe Mr. Prettyman could explain this, but you would have a scenario in which an owner is attempting to evict a non-paying resident. The owner brings an action for possession or serves a notice of termination, and the renter in response says, no, I called P&M to complain to them about the functioning of my power meter, or I called the gas company about the safety of the gas line in my apartment 3 months ago. Therefore, your filing to evict me is retaliation and is prohibited by law. It seems that could happen here. And I'm wondering, Madam Chair and Mr. Prettyman, if you could explain to me if I'm reading this wrong.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Madam Chair, Representatives, Mr. Speaker. So I think what this does is create the presumption, the rebuttable presumption, when the tenant has engaged in the activity and the owner files. Now, they have to show the 2 things. They engaged in the activity within the past 6 months, and the owner filed or increased rent or what have you. Then the burden shifts to the owner to articulate a reason that is not protected for evicting. And it
Madam Chair, couldn't that be that? Couldn't the owner say, well, I'm doing the eviction because the tenant's not paying rent? And the owner says, well, that may or may not be true, but the owner has engaged in unlawful retaliation, right? Because it doesn't, the way it's structured is the retaliation is established as soon as the lawsuit is filed and the tenant says, I complained to the gas company. So then retaliation is presumed. I don't know. That's the one part of this whole bill that just gives me pause, because you have an owner who would have no idea if a tenant complained to a gas or electric utility. And if the owner doesn't know that, how could that even theoretically, how could that form the basis of retaliation? Right? You call the customer service line at P&M, they don't tell the landlord that the tenant called. The landlord would have no idea.
Madam Chair, Representative, if we added simply complained to the owner about a gas, electric, or water utility company about the functioning or safety of mechanical device, utility service, or owner supplied appliance, would that help clarify that, as far as just being able to understand that they did give notice to the landlord and
absolutely,
perhaps
the
utility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that to me seems totally fair, right? That if it's somehow, it's just so that the owner has some, can have notice in advance. I think that's totally fine. that would certainly do it. And that seems to me that it would strike the right balance.
And I just, we haven't conferred about this, and hearing even Representative Nybert about the correction earlier, I think we're okay to entertain the two clarifications regarding both this about it specifying that the owner was informed of the utility or et cetera, with that provision as it continues, that they had been given notice. And then we'll also look at what Representative Nybert was discussing previous. I don't know how this committee necessarily handles that. I'm having a bit of a flashback as to how we handled it before. But we can, commit to those for the floor as we had in the previous session, since they're just two clarifying points, and Rep Rubio and I have already conferred about how to possibly reword that. I think we could easily do that once it gets to the floor, if that's the will of this committee.
Madam Chair, I'm totally comfortable to do that, and I will even make the motion for a do pass on this bill, and then figure out what we might want to do on the floor, because I certainly don't want to slow this down or stand in the way. I loved hearing the testimony earlier about all the stakeholders that came together and worked out this compromise. So I definitely do not want to be an impediment in any way. So I'm happy to be recorded as making the motion for due pass, at the appropriate time, and just working out what to me seems like a pretty minor little tweak for a floor amendment.
Looks like Mr. Speaker is the last one we have with a hand up. Representative Eli, so you just turned your camera on. Would you like to add anything?
No, Madam Chair, I'm ready. I tell you what, if there's nobody else, I'll move a do pass.
Thank you. We'll take that motion, a do pass on. So far, this bill is not amended, correct?
That's what I understand, Madam Chair.
So we have a do pass on House Bill 65.
Second.
Who was that?
Rep Chandler.
Thank you. So we have a do pass motion from Representative Eli, a second from Representative Chandler. Might we please do our roll call vote now?
Representative Alcon,
Yes.
Representative Chandler,
Yes.
Representative Cook,
No.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
Representative Eli,
Yes.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative McQueen,
Yes.
Representative Nybert, Representative Nybert,
Oh.
Representative Ring,
No, ma'am.
Representative Townsend,
No, ma'am.
Vice Chair Cadena,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
by a vote of 8-3, we have a do pass on House Bill 65.
I thought we had 4 no's. I thought we had Representative.
Oh, did Representative Nybert say no? Oh, okay. I didn't, by a vote of 8-4.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you, representatives. By a vote of 8-4, you have a do pass on House Bill 65. Before I pass this over to Chair Casey, I just also wanted to offer one more comment. I, as many have appreciated, also noted the incredible collaboration you led to get from where we were for the exhausting hours in HJC last year till today. I have received communications that the New Mexico Association of Realtors, which include property managers, have offered a couple of technical fixes. I would ask that as you move these other clarifying and technical fixes into floor amendments, that you might consider their communications as well in the process. Thank you, representatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you all.
So I believe I'm next on the agenda, so we'll be switching back to Chair Chasey and moving to HB 81. Unless Chair, you end up needing a bit more time and we can go to 69 next.
We can go.
Okay.
To your bill. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. If possible, I'd like to have Monica Alt from the Fines and Fees Organization admitted as an expert, along with Douglas Carver from the New Mexico Sentencing Commission.